The sun was setting over the small city of Crestwood, casting a warm orange glow across the streets. The day had been uneventful for Officer Mark Reeves, who sat in his patrol car sipping lukewarm coffee while keeping an eye on the quiet neighborhood. It wasn't often that anything exciting happened in this sleepy town, but tonight, something unusual was about to unfold. As he drove down Maple Street, his attention caught a black sedan rolling past an intersection without signaling. "Well, there's my action for the night," he muttered under his breath with a faint smile. He flicked on the flashing lights and pulled the car over near the curb. The driver, a middle-aged black woman wearing jeans and a blazer, seemed calm but slightly irritated as she lowered her window. Officer Reeves stepped out of his vehicle, adjusting his belt before approaching the sedan. His boots clicked softly against the pavement as he walked up to the driver's side. Through the open window, he noticed the woman glancing at him with a mix of curiosity and annoyance. Her hands rested firmly on the steering wheel, and her posture suggested she wasn't thrilled about being stopped. "Good evening, ma'am," Officer Reeves said politely, though his tone carried the usual authority expected of someone in uniform. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" The woman sighed lightly, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I assume it's because I didn't use my turn signal," she replied, her voice smooth but laced with skepticism. "But if I may, officer, I don't recall seeing any other cars around when I made that turn." Reeves nodded, trying to maintain a professional demeanor. "That's correct, ma'am. Even if there aren't other vehicles nearby, it's still the law to signal your intentions." He paused briefly, then added, "May I see your license and registration, please?" Without argument, the woman reached into her bag and retrieved her documents, handing them over with a polite nod. As Reeves took the items, he couldn't help but notice how composed she seemed. Most people would either be nervous or defensive during a traffic stop, but this woman exuded confidence. There was an air of authority about her, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Back at his patrol car, Reeves typed the information into his system, expecting nothing more than routine details to pop up. But as he waited for the results, he found himself studying the name on the license, Dr. Evelyn Carter. Something about it sounded familiar, like he'd heard it somewhere recently. Shaking off the thought, he glanced back at the sedan. Inside, Dr. Carter appeared unfazed, scrolling through her phone as though she were waiting in line at a grocery store rather than sitting on the side of the road after being pulled over by the police. The evening air grew cooler and the streetlights flickered on one by one, casting soft pools of light onto the pavement. Officer Reeves felt a strange unease creeping in, though he couldn't explain why. This stop should have been simple, just another mundane task in a long list of responsibilities. But something told him this encounter was going to be different. Little did he know, this seemingly ordinary moment was about to take a surprising turn that would leave a lasting impact on both their lives. As Officer Reeves stood beside his patrol car, the license and registration in hand, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something about this situation was off. He glanced back at the sit-in, where Dr. Evelyn Carter sat patiently, her expression unreadable. She wasn't fidgeting, arguing, or showing any signs of nervousness, traits he'd come to expect during traffic stops. Instead, she appeared completely at ease, almost as if she were waiting for him to figure out something he hadn't yet. Reeves decided to double-check the details on her license. The name Dr. Evelyn Carter still lingered in his mind like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Carter, Carter, he murmured under his breath, trying to recall why it sounded so familiar. Meanwhile, his dashboard computer hummed quietly as it processed her information. Everything seemed normal. No outstanding warrants, no prior offenses, nothing unusual. Yet the longer he stared at the screen, the more his instincts told him there was more to this woman than met the eye. Back at the sit-in, Dr. Carter tapped lightly on her phone, scrolling through emails. Her thoughts drifted momentarily to the challenges ahead. Tomorrow marked her first day as the new police chief of Crestwood PD, a position she had worked tirelessly to earn. She knew stepping into such a role wouldn't be easy, especially given the department's reputation for needing reform. But she also knew change wouldn't happen overnight. Still, she couldn't help but wonder how officers like the one standing just a few feet away would react when they learned who she was. Her musings were interrupted when Officer Reeves returned to her window. His body language had shifted slightly. He seemed less authoritative now, almost hesitant. "Ma'am," he began, his voice tinged with uncertainty, "I do need to ask. You weren't speeding or swerving earlier, were you?" Dr. Carter raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by the question. "No, officer," she replied calmly. "If I had been, I'm sure you'd have mentioned it by now." There was a subtle edge to her tone, though she kept her demeanor polite. "Is there another reason you're asking?" Reeves hesitated, unsure how to proceed. He wanted to appear confident, but something about her presence made him second-guess himself. Finally, he cleared his throat and said, "Just routine questions, ma'am. We try to cover all bases." At that moment, Dr. Carter leaned forward slightly, her gaze locking onto his. "Officer," she said evenly, "do you often pull people over for minor infractions like failing to signal when no other cars are around? Or is this stop perhaps rooted in something else?" Her words hung in the air between them, sharp yet measured. Reeves felt a flush creep up his neck. Was she suggesting what he thought she was? He quickly shook his head. "No, ma'am, not at all. This is purely procedural." But deep down, he couldn't ignore the kernel of doubt her question planted. Had he reacted too quickly? Would he have stopped someone else under the same circumstances? These thoughts swirled in his mind as he returned to his patrol car, determined to wrap things up swiftly. Inside the sit-in, Dr. Carter sighed softly, leaning back against the seat. She wasn't angry, not exactly, but she recognized the weight of moments like these. They weren't just about her. They represented larger issues within law enforcement and society itself. And while she didn't relish being pulled over, she understood the importance of addressing these situations head-on. Unbeknownst to both of them, the tension building between them was about to reach a tipping point. Officer Reeves stared once more at the name on the license, his fingers hovering over the keyboard as he prepared to run one final check. What he discovered next would change everything. For him, for Dr. Carter, and for the entire Crestwood Police Department. Back in his patrol car, Officer Reeves stared at the name on the license again. Dr. Evelyn Carter. It felt like a puzzle he couldn't solve, nagging at the edges of his memory. He tapped his fingers lightly on the steering wheel, trying to recall where he'd heard it before. Was she someone important? The local leader? The professor? His mind raced through possibilities, but nothing concrete came to him. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter remained seated in her sit-in, scrolling through emails on her phone. She was used to being underestimated. It happened often enough, but tonight's encounter carried an extra layer of irony. Tomorrow, she would step into her new role as the police chief of Crestwood PD, tasked with reshaping the department and fostering trust within the community. And here she was, being questioned by one of her soon-to-be officers over something as trivial as failing to signal at an empty intersection. Her thoughts drifted back to the challenges ahead. The department had its share of issues. Outdated practices, strained relationships with minority communities, and resistance to reform. But Dr. Carter wasn't deterred. She had spent years studying criminal justice systems, advocating for equitable policing, and working directly with marginalized groups. This job wasn't just another position for her, it was a calling. Still, she knew earning respect wouldn't be easy, especially from those who might see her appointment as a threat to tradition. As Officer Reeves scrolled absent-mindedly through recent department memos on his dashboard tablet, his eyes suddenly froze. There it was, an announcement from headquarters introducing their new police chief, Dr. Evelyn Carter, Ph.D., former head of community policing reform. Below the text was a photo of the same woman sitting calmly in the sit-in just a few feet away. His stomach dropped as realization hit him like a freight train. "Oh no," he whispered under his breath, his face flushing red. How could he not have recognized her? The memo had gone out weeks ago, and everyone in the department had been briefed. Yet here he was, pulling her over mere hours before she was set to take command. The irony was almost too much to bear. For a moment, panic gripped him. What if she thought this stop was racially motivated? Or worse, what if she decided to make an example out of him on her first day? His heart pounded as he considered the implications. He imagined the whispers among his colleagues, the potential damage to his career. But then, taking a deep breath, he reminded himself that Dr. Carter wasn't just any leader. Her reputation preceded her. She was known for fairness, empathy, and a commitment to progress. If anyone could understand human error, surely it would be her. Still, the weight of the situation pressed heavily on him. He glanced back at the sit-in, watching as Dr. Carter typed something on her phone. She looked composed, unfazed by the delay. That calm demeanor only made him more nervous. Would she confront him, call him out publicly, or perhaps use this moment to teach him a lesson about bias and accountability? Reeves clenched his jaw, knowing he had no choice but to face her. He grabbed the license and registration, stepped out of the patrol car, and walked slowly back toward the sit-in. Each step felt heavier than the last, his boots scuffing against the pavement. As he approached, he noticed her glance up briefly before returning her attention to her phone. Her expression gave nothing away, leaving him unsure of what to expect. "Ma'am," he began hesitantly, his voice cracking slightly under the pressure. He faltered, struggling to find the right words. For once in his career, Officer Reeves felt completely out of his depth, and all because of a routine traffic stop that had spiraled into something far more significant than he ever could have anticipated. Officer Reeves stood beside the sit-in, his heart thumping so loudly he was sure Dr. Carter could hear it. He clutched her license and registration tightly in his hand, as if holding onto them might somehow anchor him to reality. "Ma'am," he began again, his voice trembling slightly despite his best efforts to sound calm. I need to apologize." Dr. Carter looked up from her phone, her brow furrowing in curiosity. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that made him feel even more exposed. "Apologize," she repeated, her tone neutral but probing. "For what exactly?" Reeves swallowed hard, his throat dry. He shifted uncomfortably on his feet, acutely aware of how awkward he must look. "Well, he hesitated, searching for the right words. "You see, ma'am, I didn't realize who you are at first. And now that I do, I understand this whole situation might have come across differently than intended." Her expression remained unreadable, though there was a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Differently how?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. Her voice carried a quiet authority that demanded honesty. Reeves took a deep breath, steeling himself. "Ma'am, I saw your name mentioned in a memo recently. You're our new police chief." The words tumbled out quickly, as if saying them faster would lessen their weight. "You're starting tomorrow, and—" He stopped abruptly when he noticed the faintest hint of a smile playing at the corners of her lips. For a moment, he thought she might laugh or scold him, but instead, she simply nodded. "Yes, officer," she said evenly. "That's correct. I am Dr. Evelyn Carter, your incoming chief." The confirmation hit him like a punch to the gut. His cheeks burned hotter than ever, and he instinctively straightened his posture, as if trying to regain some semblance of professionalism. "Ma'am, I had no idea when I pulled you over," he stammered. "If I had known." "You wouldn't have stopped me," she interrupted gently, her gaze steady. There was no accusation in her tone, only curiosity. It was as if she were inviting him to reflect on his own actions rather than condemning them outright. Reeves hesitated, caught off guard by her composure. I don't know," he admitted finally. "Maybe I would have handled things differently." Dr. Carter studied him for a long moment, her expression softening. "That's an honest answer," she said after a pause. "And honesty is always a good place to start." Her response surprised him. He'd expected anger or frustration, maybe even a lecture about racial bias or systemic issues within law enforcement. Instead, she seemed almost understanding, but that only made him feel worse. Here she was, showing grace and patience, while he stood there grappling with his own mistakes. "Ma'am," he said earnestly, "I truly am sorry. This wasn't personal. It never is. But I can see now why it might feel that way. And I want to make sure you know I respect you and the work you're coming here to do." Dr. Carter nodded slowly, her smile widening just a fraction. "Thank you for saying that, Officer Reeves," she replied. "But let me ask you something. Do you think this stop would have happened if I weren't black?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy and undeniable. Reeves opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, unsure of what to say. He wanted to deny it, to reassure her that he treated everyone equally, but deep down, he couldn't be certain. That uncertainty gnawed at him, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about his own biases. Finally, he sighed deeply. "I don't know, ma'am," he admitted quietly. "But I'll tell you this. I'm going to do better. Starting today." Dr. Carter regarded him thoughtfully, her smile warm and encouraging. "Good," she said simply. "That's all any of us can do. Try to do better." In that moment, Officer Reeves felt a strange mix of relief and determination wash over him. This encounter could have gone very differently, but instead of judgment, he'd been met with understanding and a challenge to grow. As he handed back her license and registration, he realized this wasn't just a lesson for him. It was a glimpse into the kind of leader Dr. Carter intended to be. And if her approach was anything like this moment, Crestwood PD was in for a transformation unlike anything they'd seen before. Dr. Carter accepted her license and registration from Officer Reeves with a small nod, her expression thoughtful but not unkind. She could see the weight of his embarrassment in the way he stood, his shoulders slightly hunched, his eyes avoiding direct contact. It was clear that this moment had shaken him, forcing him to confront questions he might have otherwise ignored. And while she wasn't one to shy away from difficult conversations, she also understood the value of turning an awkward situation into an opportunity for growth. "Officer Reeves," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I appreciate your apology, and I believe it's sincere. But let's be honest here. This isn't just about you or me. Moments like these are bigger than any one person. They highlight systemic issues that we all need to address." Reeves nodded slowly, still feeling the sting of his mistake, but eager to listen. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "I can see that now." Dr. Carter leaned back in her seat, her posture relaxed yet commanding. "You're not alone in making errors," she continued. "We all carry biases, whether we realize it or not. The key is recognizing them, and then working actively to overcome them. That's something I plan to prioritize as your new chief." Her words resonated with him, cutting through the fog of his guilt and offering a path forward. For the first time since realizing who she was, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wouldn't end in disaster after all. Maybe it could actually lead to something meaningful. "I'd like to invite you to join me tomorrow at headquarters," Dr. Carter added, her tone shifting to something more collaborative. "We'll be discussing implicit bias training and equitable policing practices. I think it would benefit both of us, and the entire department, to start these conversations early." Reeves blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected an invitation. He'd braced himself for reprimands or formal complaints. But this was different. "Are you sure, ma'am?" he asked cautiously, "after everything that just happened?" She chuckled softly, the sound warm and disarming. "Of course I'm sure," she said. "If anything, tonight proves exactly why we need open dialogue. You didn't set out to offend me, and I don't hold grudges over honest mistakes. What matters is what happens next, how we move forward together." Her confidence and grace left him speechless. Here she was, extending an olive branch, despite having every right to demand accountability. It wasn't just leadership, it was humanity. And in that moment, Officer Reeves realized that Dr. Evelyn Carter wasn't just stepping into a role. She was stepping into a mission to change hearts, minds, and systems. "I'll be there, man," he said earnestly, his voice steadier now. "Thank you for giving me this chance." Dr. Carter smiled warmly, her eyes reflecting both wisdom and compassion. "Good," she replied, "because trust isn't built overnight. It takes effort, consistency, and a willingness to learn. And I believe you're capable of rising to the occasion." With that, she turned the key in the ignition, the engine purring to life. "Have a good evening, Officer Reeves," she said, her tone light but purposeful. "I'll see you tomorrow." As she drove away, Reeves stood rooted to the spot, watching the taillights disappear into the distance. The encounter had been brief, but its impact lingered long after she was gone. He couldn't help but replay their conversation in his mind. The way she had handled the situation with such poise and intention. She hadn't shamed him or dismissed him. Instead, she had challenged him to grow, to reflect, and to do better. For the rest of the night, Reeves found himself thinking about what she'd said, about bias, accountability, and the importance of learning from mistakes. By the time he returned to the station, he knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow wouldn't just mark Dr. Carter's first day as police chief. It would mark the beginning of a new chapter for everyone under her leadership. And if Officer Reeves had anything to say about it, he intended to rise to the challenge. The next morning, Officer Reeves arrived at headquarters earlier than usual, his mind still replaying the events of the previous night. He had barely slept, tossing and turning as he thought about Dr. Carter's words, and the challenge she had subtly placed before him. Today wasn't just another day on the job. It was a chance to prove that he could rise to the occasion, to show that he was willing to learn and grow. As he stepped into the briefing room, he noticed an unusual energy in the air. Officers milled about, whispering excitedly, or perhaps nervously, about their new chief. Some were curious, others skeptical, but all seemed aware that change was coming. The room buzzed with anticipation as everyone took their seats, waiting for Dr. Evelyn Carter to make her entrance. When she finally walked in, there was no mistaking her presence. Dressed in a sharp blazer and tailored slacks, she carried herself with quiet authority, exuding both confidence and approachability. Her smile was warm, but her gaze was steady, scanning the room as if taking stock of each person individually. She didn't waste time with grand introductions or empty platitudes. Instead, she dove straight into what mattered most: building trust and fostering accountability within the department. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice clear and commanding yet inviting. "I know many of you have questions about my vision for this department, so let me start by being transparent. I'm not here to upend everything you've worked for. I'm here to help us all do better, together." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "Last night, I had an interesting experience. One of your colleagues pulled me over for failing to signal at an intersection." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room, and several officers exchanged glances, clearly surprised. Reeves felt his cheeks flush again, but Dr. Carter didn't single him out. Instead, she used the story as a teaching moment. "At first, I'll admit, I questioned the stop," she continued. "Was it necessary? Could implicit bias have played a role? But instead of jumping to conclusions, I chose to engage in conversation. And you know what I discovered? An officer who made a mistake, but also an officer who was willing to reflect, apologize, and commit to doing better." Her eyes scanned the room once more, landing briefly on Reeves before moving on. "That's the kind of mindset we need here. Not perfection, but progress. Not fear of making mistakes, but a willingness to learn from them. Because at the end of the day, our job isn't just about enforcing laws. It's about serving people, all people, equitably and fairly." The room fell silent, every officer hanging on her words. For some, her message was inspiring. For others, it was daunting. Change never came easily, especially in institutions steeped in tradition. But Dr. Carter's tone left no room for resistance. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a call to action. After the meeting, she invited a smaller group of officers, including Reeves, to participate in a workshop on implicit bias training. Sitting around a conference table, they discussed real-world scenarios, shared personal experiences, and explored ways to improve interactions with the community. At one point, Dr. Carter turned to Reeves and asked, "How do you think we can build trust with residents who may feel targeted or misunderstood?" Reeves hesitated, then spoke honestly. "By listening," he said. "Really listening. Not just hearing their words, but understanding where they're coming from. And by holding ourselves accountable when we fall short." Dr. Carter nodded approvingly. "Exactly," she said. "Accountability starts with us. If we want the community to trust us, we have to earn that trust every single day." By the end of the session, Reeves felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about avoiding future traffic stops gone wrong. It was about becoming the kind of officer and the kind of person he wanted to be. As he left headquarters that evening, he realized something important. Leadership wasn't about wielding power, it was about empowering others. And under Dr. Carter's guidance, he, and the entire department, was ready to embrace that lesson. In the weeks that followed, Dr. Evelyn Carter wasted no time putting her vision into action. She introduced a series of reforms aimed at rebuilding trust between the police department and the community. Her first major initiative was expanding implicit bias training beyond the initial workshop. Every officer, regardless of rank or experience, was required to participate in ongoing sessions designed to challenge assumptions and foster empathy. Officer Reeves found himself deeply involved in these efforts, not because he was forced to be, but because he wanted to make a difference. He began mentoring rookies, sharing insights from his own journey of self-reflection. "It's not about being perfect," he'd tell them during roll call. "It's about being aware and willing to grow." His words carried weight now, especially since everyone knew how he had stumbled on his first encounter with Chief Carter. Rather than hiding from the story, he embraced it as proof that change was possible. Dr. Carter also implemented new protocols for traffic stops and other routine interactions with civilians. Officers were encouraged to ask themselves 3 questions before taking action. Is this necessary? Is it fair? Could my actions be perceived as biased? These simple yet powerful guidelines became part of daily briefings, printed on posters hung throughout the station. At first, some officers grumbled about the added scrutiny, but over time, they began to see the value. Complaints from residents dropped noticeably, and positive feedback started rolling in. One evening, Reeves accompanied Dr. Carter to a town hall meeting where she addressed concerned citizens directly. She didn't shy away from tough questions. In fact, she welcomed them. When one resident asked why the department hadn't done more to address racial profiling sooner, she responded candidly. "You're right to hold us accountable," she said. "For too long, we've relied on outdated practices and ignored voices calling for change. But I'm here to listen and to act." The crowd erupted in applause, and even skeptics couldn't help but admire her transparency. Slowly but surely, attitudes began to shift, not just within the department, but across the entire city. Community members who had once avoided contact with law enforcement started attending neighborhood watch meetings and collaborative forums. Trust, though fragile, began to take root. Reeves noticed the difference when he patrolled the streets. Residents greeted him by name, thanked him for his service, and even offered suggestions on how the department could improve further. One afternoon, an elderly woman stopped him outside a grocery store to share her concerns about speeding cars near a local park. Instead of brushing her off, he listened intently, promised to look into it, and followed up days later with updates. It was small moments like these, moments rooted in mutual respect, that reminded him why he had joined the force in the first place. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter faced challenges of her own. Not everyone welcomed her reforms with open arms. Some veteran officers resisted her progressive ideas, accusing her of undermining tradition. Others spread rumors questioning her qualifications, despite her extensive background in criminal justice reform. Through it all, she remained steadfast, refusing to let negativity derail her mission. "Change is uncomfortable," she told her team during a particularly tense staff meeting. "But discomfort is where growth happens." Her perseverance paid off. By the end of her third month as chief, Crestwood PD had transformed into a model for departments nationwide. News outlets praised their innovative approaches to policing, highlighting programs like youth mentorship initiatives and partnerships with local advocacy groups. Even critics had to admit that something remarkable was happening in Crestwood. A culture of accountability and compassion was taking shape. For Officer Reeves, the transformation was personal. He no longer dreaded difficult conversations or feared making mistakes. Instead, he saw them as opportunities to learn and improve. And while he still thought back to that fateful night when he pulled over his new boss, he now viewed it not as a failure, but as the beginning of a journey, one that would shape not only his career but the future of an entire community. Months had passed since Dr. Evelyn Carter stepped into her role as police chief, and the ripple effects of her leadership could be felt throughout Crestwood. What had once been a department mired in outdated practices and strained relationships was now a beacon of progress, not just for the city, but for law enforcement agencies across the country. News stories highlighted how Crestwood PD had reduced complaints by 40% in less than a year, thanks to initiatives like implicit bias training, community engagement programs, and transparent communication with residents. For Officer Mark Reeves, the transformation was profound. The man who had once approached a routine traffic stop with hesitation and uncertainty was now mentoring rookies on the importance of fairness and empathy. During one training session, he shared his story openly, recounting that night when he unknowingly pulled over his new boss. "It wasn't easy," he admitted to the group of young officers, "but it taught me something valuable. We're all human, and we all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after those mistakes." His honesty resonated deeply with the trainees, many of whom were navigating their own struggles with self-doubt and fear of failure. By sharing his experience, Reeves became more than just a senior officer. He became a symbol of growth and resilience within the department. And while he still occasionally thought about that awkward encounter with Dr. Carter, he now saw it as a turning point, a moment that pushed him to become better, both personally and professionally. Dr. Carter herself remained a steady force of inspiration. Though she faced ongoing challenges, budget constraints, pushback from resistant officers, and the occasional public critique, she never wavered in her commitment to justice and equality. She often reminded her team that change wasn't about achieving perfection. It was about striving for improvement every single day. "Progress takes time," she'd say during meetings. "But if we stay focused on our mission, to protect and serve everyone fairly, we'll get there together." Her dedication earned her widespread respect, not only within the department, but also among the people of Crestwood. Residents began attending town hall meetings in record numbers, eager to collaborate with officers on solving neighborhood issues. Kids waved at patrol cars instead of running away, and families invited officers to block parties and school events. For the first time in years, the badge no longer represented division. It represented partnership. One evening, as winter settled over the city, Dr. Carter stood outside headquarters watching snowflakes drift lazily to the ground. Officer Reeves approached her, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. "Thought you might need this," he said with a grin, handing her one of the steaming mugs. "Thank you, Officer Reeves," she replied warmly, accepting the drink. They stood side by side for a moment, taking in the quiet beauty of the season. Finally, she spoke. "Do you remember what you said to me during that workshop? About accountability starting with us?" Reeves nodded, smiling faintly. "Yeah, I remember." "Well," she continued, "you've lived up to those words. You've shown this department, and this community, that real leadership comes from action, not titles. I'm proud of you." Her praise caught him off guard, and for a moment, he didn't know what to say. But then he realized something. This journey wasn't just about earning accolades or proving oneself. It was about creating a legacy, a future where trust replaced fear and understanding triumphed over prejudice. As they finished their drinks and headed back inside, the lights of the station glowed brightly against the snowy backdrop, symbolizing hope amid the cold. Dr. Evelyn Carter's work was far from done, but one thing was certain. Crestwood PD had changed forever, and under her guidance, it would continue to evolve, one small step at a time, leaving behind a legacy of fairness, compassion, and unity.